Hey everyone, we are now live for driving product-led growth with your RevOps data stack. We'll give people a few minutes to trickle in. In the meantime, we have a poll about where you are in your PLG journey. So click on the poll tab on the bottom right to answer, do you have a lead scoring system using product data? And again, if you stay until the very end, lunch is on us. We'll send you a $20 DoorDash gift card through email afterwards. Just one per person, US, Canada only, but you'll get that in your email after the session. And while people are trickling in and answering the poll, Cyril, I had a question for you. Among your clients or the companies that you're working with, how many of them are trying to leverage product data more effectively?
So I think every single one of our clients want to go there, like use data in a more of an operational fashion. Right now, we think this as being more of a trend picking up. So we see this as being really, 2023 kind of game changer for our clients.
Yeah, makes sense.
I guess I'm curious while we wait for other people, like, why do you see that being more of a trend now? Like, why now?
Well, I guess we'll talk about it during this hour that we have together. But while we have this whole modern data stack that's been implemented, and we've seen analytics being really used throughout most organizations, modern analytics anyway. What's the next thing? Now that you've got reports and you've got analysis, how do you make your data work for you in a more automated way instead of having to use human to do the analysis for you?
Got it. Right. I don't want to spoil the rest of the presentation. The first 2-3 minutes, right? Henry will take us on that journey.
We have some votes coming in. 6 people have said that yes, they do have a PQL model, product qualified lead model.
Okay.
6 people have said, what's a PQL? Which we will educate you on today. So you're in the right place. And then 5 people said, I wish I had one.
I mean, as Cyril said, like, people want it, like it's how you get it. That's the tricky part. But
anyone
we'll make it sound easy.
Did anyone answer, I don't need one?
No, nobody has said I don't need one. 2 people have said I have a scoring model, but not with product data. Actually, the fastest growing is, yes, I have a PQL model, 10 people so far. So that's awesome.
That's great.
Cool. Well, we'll let people continue to answer the poll, and I think we can kick it off. So I'll hand this over to Sil. Go for it.
Great. So today we're here to talk about driving PLG with RevOps data stack. I met Henry a couple of years back and followed along his journey, and what he's built at Apollo is super impressive. So I'm really excited to hear him talk about it more to all of you. We also have Cyril, who's be joining Henry in that journey. And without having said that, we'll move forward here and get started with like the rest of the introduction. So Henry, you can talk to us about what you do at Apollo, your journey, and all the good stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. And I think like it's definitely been a team, a huge team contribution in terms of what we built here. Both on like the product and the growth teams and the engineering teams are phenomenal. That was a huge driver in me joining Apollo, is the quality of the product. But then on the data stack side and our kind of revenue operations stack, I have a phenomenal team. Cyril and his team have helped to deploy that as well. So I can't take a ton of credit for the building side. But yeah, I oversee revenue, strategy, operations, and BI analytics. It's all they're kind of centralized teams. So I think that centralized model really helps in a PLG business where you have a lot of moving data and like a very high need for fidelity of data and sort of truth. And it's an iterative thing. So we're continuing to build, continuing to deploy things, link new sources, augment that data, and it's really exciting to see what that unlocks.
And what about you, Cyril? Like, what do you do at Montreal Analytics? Tell us more.
So I call myself the glorified paper pusher, being the CEO. But I actually used to be a product guy and like a product manager and I have some kind of a large interest in product-led growth. But I was always, data person, and in whatever role I've been, be it product manager, actually I've been in the sales as a sales role as well. And I have a passion for data and how to use data to make things more efficient. And so now, I funded Montreal Analytics. We are a consulting firm on the modern data stack. And we really taking my knowledge of product, my knowledge of e-commerce, and also my passion for data, and helping our clients like Henry and Apollo to get value out of analytics, really.
Sounds good. So let's keep moving. Today we have a jam-packed agenda. So Henry is really going to get us through the data changes for product-led growth, like what you've seen in the past. Building the Apollo Analytics stack, like Cyril talked about, why he joined that journey, how he helped them do this. Then Henry will guide us through use cases using data in the stacks at Apollo. And then at the end, we'll have a bunch of questions between the three of us. And then, any questions from the audience. So if you have any question, like even right now, feel free to load them up in the chat, and we'll make sure to answer them at the end of the conversation. So having said that, we can move forward with the data challenge of product growth, and we will take it from there.
I think I'll start this one if you don't mind, Henry. Actually, I think there's a bit of a I think for the sake of the audience, maybe a quick reminder what PLG is. So product-led growth, and it's really about letting your potential customers try your product for free, or not for free, like with a small fee maybe, and realize the value the product is providing, and then bringing them into a sales cycle. So essentially, as new users sign up, you want to measure how far along they are in the process towards realizing really the value that your product is bringing. And when they do achieve those values, or as we call it in the product realm, the aha moment, it's really about getting that information to your team and enriching your CRM. So routing, for example, the actual prospect to your sales team. Now, not just routing, it's also about enabling the go-to-market team, be they marketing or sales, to make better decision at the right timing. So if the prospect is at this aha moment that I mentioned, let's reach out to him right now because it's the right moment. Or if a current client's consumption is following a certain pattern and it looks like it's going for an early renewal, well, let's start the upselling conversation. And that's really what PLG is about. And the thing is that the challenge, for PLG, and that's really what this slide is about, is that usually you're going to have sales data and marketing data in your CRM, and very little you'll see product data, available to the go-to-market team, because product data is often siloed, whereas marketing and sales data usually live in the kind of same ecosystem. And so what you need really to do is getting there, like being able to model this data, product data, marketing data, sales data together. It's a process. You need, I like to call this giving an opinion to data. And it happens through the whole analytics engine that we're going to be discussing today, from source to transformation to destination. And with all that, essentially, when you achieve that, when you have given access, to your team that have proper data, and it's hopefully 100% sure guarantee it's going to lead to improved lead quality and better close rates.
So, quick question here, because you mentioned product data a couple of times, and then in the poll that we started at the beginning, we were asking people how they use product data. So, can you just kind of help us define what you mean by product data here? Just giving us an example of a metric, so even better, a field name that is used in a CRM or something.
I'll let Henry talk about the field in the CRM, but the product data is essentially behavioral data on your product. Where is a specific user on your customer journey? Is he, just signing up? Is he, has he triggered some kind of a feature? As he used a bunch of different tools or features on the platform? Are they coming back? Are they staying a long time? Are they just sign up and never came back? So it's really about how people are using your product and informing you on their behavior, but also how your product is performing.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think like zooming out, there isn't one standard, like one size fits all approach to PQL. And I think that's kind of the definition of it, right? Like, and it's specific to business, it's specific to the tier, the segment that you're working, where they are in the funnel. I tend to look at it as like customer and user behavior within your product and their usage of like a feature or kind of core function. You can get from that activity levels and pull out like, is this person potentially a kind of either current or future customer champion for us? Can they help us like drive adoption and engagement with our product within that organization? Or are they kind of early in their journey and maybe they need some support or like intervention from CS and the sales team? And I think like what it enables you to do is really time your interventions to kind of maximize the value that you give your customer in parallel to them realizing, maybe like Cyril said, the aha moment or that when they realize that core value of your product. So like instead of just being random in your approach, you're really reaching out when you offer the most value to those customers or to those users.
Got it. I guess since you're talking here, Henry, I have another question for you related to CRM. Is like, what's a sign that you started to have like untrustworthy data in your CRM, right? Like getting data for product-led growth is having trusted data in the CRM. Like, when do you know that you don't have trusted data, I guess, as an ops leader?
Yeah, I think it's less about like whether you have or do not have untrustworthy data, and it's more just around like aligning the entire data stack around a single source of truth. So particularly when you move your GTM systems into a warehouse, so like CRM, your support platform, your like product analytics platform, there's going to be some variance in how those metrics are defined or captured in those systems, and that could be kind of small margins or kind of larger ones. I think once you start rolling out that centralized data warehouse, data lake, BI tool, it's super important to have a governance plan in that centralized data stack so that there is high confidence and like high fidelity in that data across the whole organization.
Okay. All right. Let's keep going then. Here. Why can't I click this? Sorry. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, so I guess like Cyril, I guess you and I have been working together just over a year now. So initial early objectives have evolved. It's been definitely an iterative process and really like building out our data stack and the way that data enables all of the go-to-market teams. Originally, it was just to bring in kind of deeper insights, future-proof our data stack as well. Like BLG has a fire hose of signups and users that come through, and having that live in a CRM is definitely not optimal. Making the warehouse the system of record for your customer is like, I can't recommend to do it early enough. That's definitely a kind of P1 level item. And then just creating alignment, like I mentioned before, like across the company to drive that confidence in the data. And once you have that structured data, then you're able to pass that back to your GTM teams in a highly actionable way. So I guess we'll touch on this later, but like product data is super granular and lacks context. And Cyril mentioned like having an opinion on data, like that's the value that you can really drive once you have that standardized single source of truth that everyone's aligned around. Okay.
And I have a question. Like, I'm just quickly going back. I'm a sales rep at Apollo today, right? Like, what does deeper insight means to me? Like, how does that improve my life? Like, can you give us kind of like an example of that?
Yeah, well, I think like I said, like product data in its granular form can be super overwhelming for anyone.
Mm-hmm.
There can be missing context as well. So if you're putting that raw data from a CDP, being able to transform it in the warehouse and augment with demographic data, with like CTA responses, marketing data, like multi-source augmentation, and then you can package that up and really pass it back into the CRM or to sales or to marketing in either like a simple score, or like what's generally more helpful is like a direct kind of qualitative statement. So like this team has X number of active users in the past 30 days and has performed kind of like XYZ actions, so you should do this. And like you can really help to use that data to guide a kind of task-based or action-based outcome.
If I can add just 1 cent here, I'm sorry, I'm having some internet issues, so I hope everybody can hear me properly. It's just that, tools and platforms and sources like, your marketing data, sales data, they're going to be really system centric, like Henry said. So you're going to have raw data, and you're going to be able to go very granular into this data, but that's not what your team needs. Your team needs to have business centric data, that's gone through, as I mentioned, your analytics engine that's going to bring raw data or system-centric data into a business-centric, operational and actionable data, and that's really what you need to make your team be efficient. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good segue for the next slide. Like, Cyril, you're already holding the mic. Hopefully the internet continue to be steady here. We'd love to have you kind of like walk us through kind of like, what you built for Henry's team and his team at Apollo here.
So we build it together. To be fair, it's not just our team. It's a combination of both teams. And so, Montreal Analytics is really quite the expert on selecting the tools and building the infrastructure and building the framework for a company like Apollo to bring that business-centric logic into the data. So we're not here to tell Apollo how to run their business or what metrics make sense. We're here to enable them on figuring this out themselves. Now, the platforms that we see here on the slide is just the exhaust of that, that thinking and that thought process. And so, nothing new though under the sky. This is pretty a classic modern data stack that we see here. Fivetran for the ingestion of data piped into a Snowflake warehouse. We use dbt for most data modeling. Apollo as well Looker when it comes to exploring and reporting on this data. Census to bring this back into where people are using the data, which is Salesforce and Apollo.
Can you walk us through is it like the cookie cutter stack that you kind of just bring to every customer that you have, or is decision process between those tools? Is there a place where you don't use Looker, you don't use dbt, you use something else, or nothing at all? What's the evolution curve here, and how do you make those decisions along the way, I guess?
Well, yes, it's not a stack that fits everybody. The thing is that as a firm, though, specifically Montreal Analytics, we decided to be not too much tool agnostic. So we have our favorite platforms, and the platforms here are exactly our top favorite ones. The thing is that people will not come to us if they really want to dig into a MySQL database with a Tableau on top of it. We're not going to be too much of a help there. Now, achieving that platform, integrating those tools, is not going to happen overnight. You need to. It's a product. A data platform is a product, so you need to think about it as in a product management thought process. So that means that first, you build your business case. What do we want to achieve? What kind of value are we seeking? And then based on that, it's really, what are the tools that we're going to be selecting to achieve that? What is the total cost of ownership? What is the time to value? Should we use Snowflake instead of BigQuery? Should we use Databricks? What are we seeing as well? So, not saying, but what are other business cases that might arise in the future? So selecting those tools was really, a process, and we iterated early on the different things. I'll expand on that, but it was really about, I think Henry mentioned that, building a stack that was able to scale with Apollo, because Apollo is growing so fast, and we need to be able to account for business cases that we're not aware of right now. And so this stack, I think, reflects that thinking.
And so kind of like a follow-up question on this, like, if that's kind of like the end goal to kind of get us to a place where, you can start building on top of it and like scale with Apollo, is like, what was kind of like first few pieces that you deliver to Henry and his team, to go back to kind of like what he was looking to do, having confidence in data, like deeper insight into the PLG motion, like what was kind of like the first few blocks that you delivered to Henry and provide value to him?
I'll start, and maybe Henry, you can add some color as to why you decided what was P1, priority one for all this. But it usually, priority on this usually come from who's the main sponsor inside of a company. So in this case, Henry is leading revenue, and so for him, value from data is derived from revenue analytics. And so we started very early to get that data into the hands of the revenue team, which was the utmost priority. It was not about building a dashboard for the finance team, for example. That was not the first priority. Now it's not we're not building everything at once. First, to bring a couple of sources into warehouse, and then you model the data, and then you get access to it, and you train the team on this data. But this is just the infrastructure of it. What was really important early on is to understand how Henry and Apollo needed the data to be modeled. So conducting business case workshop, we call them model storming, and it's about aligning a company on business events. And based on that, we can build the backlog of stories that needs to be delivered on. And then we just iterate. So we try to do this the agile way. Like as I mentioned, bringing a bunch of sources first. We model the data. We give that to the hands of the business users, and then we can just improve it or tackle new sources as we go along.
I have a follow-up question then. So you on this one, Cyril, right? Like, which is, do you take kind of like vertical approach of it? So like, hey, we want to get that data in Salesforce to unlock these kind of like, revenue drivers, as you were mentioned. And so you try to say, oh, well, we need to ETL that data as fast as possible. And then we don't really transform the data, right? Like kind of like just delivering value quickly for that specific use case. Or do you take more like kind of like a phase approach where it's like, we need to ingest as much data as possible in our warehouse, and then we need to start building this kind of like source of truth into the warehouse with like, our user object, our company object that are well defined, with like tested, and like, having that confidence in the data. But then that means like you delay the value of like, servicing that data as a product to the end user. Like which one is the best way to get started, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's going to be a very opinionated, because people will have different way of thinking here. Well, definitely, we're way more of an agile organization than just an ad hoc one. So bringing everything at once and just having everything and then building everything and then releasing this to the hands of the stakeholders is usually a recipe for failure, or at least not a great adoption. So and furthermore, you're gonna increase your cost too, because let's say you use a Fivetran and you're gonna pipeline all of your data into Snowflake, and you're not using that data just yet because it's gonna take you 6 months to model everything, so that makes sense for the end user. So in the end, you've lost a lot of money, and that's really not useful. So I think what was really important here, and Henry, if you want to jump in, do so, of course, it was about time to value. How do we bring what's the easiest path to success for Apollo? Maybe it's not like having too much modeling. Maybe it's just bringing some data somewhere. But it was I think what was the most important thing was time to value. Henry?
Yeah, I think that's right. It's time to value, and like a lot of that is balancing the modeling work with insights that are actionable and can be deployed to the sales team or the marketing team to kind of optimize the way that we go to market.
But you can't go too fast either, because I think one thing we mentioned is that data quality is very important. And so if you want to go fast and take shortcuts, the thing is that you don't get a lot of shots to get adoption from non-data people on the data itself. Meaning that if at some point you bring in some data and people realize that the data is not accurate or is pretty much bad, you've lost a ton of trust, and it's going to be a journey to bring that trust back.
Yeah, I think you can go fast to an extent. I think you can't go too broad either. Like we definitely focused on one or two data sources early on and got that right. So kind of like the ARR model, for example, like really get the foundations in place and then build on those foundations versus trying to boil the ocean.
So quick question for you from the audience here, since it's like kind of like highly contextual. Like Miles is asking, what's kind of like the tool that you recommend for like tracking product usage data, right? Like we don't see it on this graph here. We just have 5 channels in just, but like, is there a specific go-to tool that you recommend people to use, or tools that you see out there in the world when you work with companies like Apollo?
So there are a ton of product analytics tools. There are open source options. I'm thinking about Snowplow. That's Redis Stack. Those are two that you can look into. They're then the most famous product analytics tools. I'm thinking Mixpanel. There's also Amplitude. That is very heavy on the market. I don't have one specific recommendation. I personally, but that's a very personal take. Sorry, I like Mixpanel. I like where the product has come. And I've used it myself as a product manager. But I think like any tool is not the solution. You need to figure out what you want to do, and just then you look at tools and you see which one is going to bring you the most value based on your roadmap or your targets.
Got it. All right. We have a bunch of questions around like data team structure and things like that. I think we can keep that to the Q&A session, and I'll address that, send it to you, Cyril, later on. Let's keep going with like, kind of like the benefits of having that data into, available at that point. So yeah, let me try to move to the next slide real quick here, if it's not frozen for some reason. There we go. Great. So Henry, tell us more about kind of like a data use case now that Cyril has done all the work with you to get to a good place. What did you do with it?
Yeah, it's what did we do with it, but then also like there's a kind of meta thing there of like what our customers are doing with it and what we're seeing on an aggregate basis. I think one of the really interesting things is the impact that product data has on your kind of typical outbound motions. So generally, like kind of non-product augmented SDR would typically get around 0.5 to 1% conversion to meeting, maybe a little bit higher. Like there's some seasonality in there. Like when what we see ourselves and what we see within our customer group as well is when you start to layer in product signals, behavior signals, like activity, CTAs, things like that, those conversion rates increase by an order of magnitude plus. Like you're looking kind of 5 to 10% conversion to meeting, because like Cyril mentioned earlier, you're using product data to enable you to reach out to the person at the right time that's helpful to them. So instead of just having a fairly kind of randomized approach, that's what the kind of product data really unlocks for your go-to-market team. And then what tools like Census enable, and I'm thrilled we have the Census direct to Apollo connector. That's really, really exciting. It enables GTM teams to manage that as well. So like we have a phenomenal engineering team that for a long time have supported our go-to-market team in enabling and piping in that product usage data. Now with the warehouse, with Census, we're like the go-to-market leaders, the operations team, they're able to do a lot of that themselves, iterate and experiment, which increases the pace of experimentation around this.
And I have a quick question here. You know, like we talked about like using those product data, you know, to kind of like help you like book more meetings, essentially, reaching out to people that are at the right time, right? Like, can you give us like an anecdote around like, you know, some data point that you thought was going to work really well or help you kind of like, you know, in this use case, and that didn't really work in the end? Like, you know, I'm happy to give some example that I've done in the past was like, you know, reaching out to people in the time zone. You know, I thought like that was like super interesting. And so we spent lots of time of like finding right time zone and making sure we knew where the people compared to the HQ was. And ultimately, you know, like people just read email asynchronously and it was not worth the effort. Like, so that's like a failure example in my past, right? But what about you, Henry? Like anything of such?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. We do a lot of experimentation, iteration, and really get very, very detailed and granular with the signals that we look for. And I think that plus a feedback loop to the team on the ground, the sales team, the SDR team, like you can build kind of a detailed predictive model based on a bunch of product signals, do a correlation analysis to make sure that you're weighting that correctly, but you're going to miss some of the context and the kind of qualitative assessment there. I think having that feedback loop with the sales team tends to surface like to your point. So like that's what surfaces I thought that would work. The data showed it would work, but maybe it's misfiring slightly. As for a specific example, we've done a lot, we tested a lot, we've experimented a lot. So with that comes a lot of things that didn't work to our expected level.
Can you give an example of something that didn't work? Like as a fun story here.
Yeah, maybe not at Apollo, but in a previous role, we tried to use, we thought proximity to a physical space, depending where customers were, would be a massive driver of interest and conversion, and really spent a lot of time and effort building a model there to automate that process. And then when we reviewed the campaign after maybe the first month, what we found out pretty quickly from speaking to customers is actually they don't want to be near where they used to. They want to be actually really far away from where they're used to. And like it was a very humbling experience.
I think I know which company you're referring to, Henry. That's nice. Well, you know, if I can just add one thing still, if you don't mind. You know, I think what Henry said here is key, is talk to your customer. You know, even if we're talking about outbound and sales, you know, campaign, get to know your current clients and see what worked for them, and try to you know, get experiment from there. And of course, you know, it's going to be perfect. You're going to fail. I guess still, you know, you mentioned that you've had past experience that were not relevant. You know, so be it. You're learning. Henry as well. You know, you're experimenting a lot at Apollo. And I think this is exactly how you should approach any you know, PLG. Like you won't tackle it the first time. It's going to be an iterative process, but like get your, you know, it's product-led growth. So get to know your users for sure.
Yeah, I would add another kind of like failure story there. Like it's on like kind of like, you know, scoring like leads for outbound purposes. Is in my previous company at Pusher, we used to never the first iteration of our models didn't take into account like time really. So, and then we never had like negative scoring. And so if someone took action, we would just increment the, you know, the engagement score with our product. But like whether you do it like the 1st of January or the 25th of December, the second action, we didn't take that into consideration. And so as you can imagine, score could only go up over time. And so we were starting to route things that didn't make any more sense, like the two kind of like signals didn't make sense when there's like 12 months apart. And so we had to take that into account. And so we ended up routing a lot of leads to people that didn't mean anything. And that was like a big ops and data failure when I was there. We had to kind of like build like, making sure that every signal was attached like a time window essentially to make sure that it counted into the scoring. So that's like a big failure on our side there. Cool. Well, I'm just conscious of time here, so let's keep going. There's a lot of questions. We'll answer them at the end in bulk. So let's go to the use cases here. Henry, let's do it.
Yeah, I think we've touched on a lot of this already. Really about like your goal is to engage with the kind of right prospects, right customers, right users at the right time. The more granular the data that you can feed in and put in a kind of actionable, helpful way, the more personalized you can get, and you can really get to kind of a hyper personalized level. An example that we've been playing with Census is around like feature gates in the product and when people hit them but don't progress. And like we have that visibility and have done for some time, but making that actionable in both the CS and sales orgs is super interesting, because not only does it show you potential upsell opportunities within your customer base, it also shows you the friction within the product as well. And then for as this kind of CS use case, enabling the team to reach out to customers who maybe are just running into the same feature gate again and again and again and having a poor experience, like that's immensely valuable. And being able to do that straight out of the data and the operations team without engineering work is like transformational.
And so how does that look like? So I'm a rep at Apollo, right? And one of my accounts, is trying to hit like a feature gating. Do I get like an alert? Like, do I know what to do with it? Like you were saying before, like in practice, like how does that look like from a life in
so
the web?
I think one of the exciting things, like, and it's multi-channel, right? Like you want to put that in as many places as you can that's helpful. So it might be a signal on the account, it might be a task that's generated. Using Census and pushing it directly into Apollo, and then using the rules engine in Apollo, you can send an email from a rep's inbox automatically as soon as that event happens, which means it's much more like you're not reliant on coming in, logging in, looking at your tasks. That piece has already happened, and then the follow-up happens again, and you can look at engagement with that campaign and wait until either wait until the response comes or follow up in a more thoughtful, personalized way. But like building on that foundation of automation is key.
Got it. So basically, as a rep, I just wake up with a bunch of people replying already to my automation, right? Like it's my life is easier, is what you're saying.
I mean, that's the ideal. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes sometimes there's additional touches, but enabling that to happen and then taking the interventions that are required on the higher friction ones is immensely preferable.
Got it. No, that's good.
I mean, I assume you guys are doing the same sort of thing as well.
Yeah, like trying to like every step of the onboarding. But I think that leads to an interesting question, and maybe one for you, Cyril, is like when, like obviously feature gating is like a very obvious kind of like wall that people hit, and so you can kind of like make sure that people can help whether implementing that feature or buying that feature, right? But like, have you seen in like other companies where there's no like feature gate? Like, how do you identify basically those important milestones that the company knows that the user needs to do, but that is not as obvious as a feature gate? Like, how does that work on the data side?
So I don't think, well, it's data is enabling that, but it's more a question of like defining your aha moment. I know as a company, what is the moment where you get your user hooked? There's a ton of literature on the internet about that, and it's also linked to, if your company is following the North Star metric framework, it's kind of linked to that as well. So if I'm not mistaken, the aha moment for Airbnb was after you've spent I don't know the exact number. It was a certain number of nights that you actually booked. And after this moment, they know that you're hooked and that they could leverage you. I mean, they don't need to invest too much on you for repeat purchases and things like that. Now, you learn that through data, of course, but it's also like how you're measuring success as a company. Based on that, you can go into the data and figure out the answer. But I think with data, data can tell you anything and everything, really. Like, you can answer any single question. I know that for a fact. I was in finance in a past life, and it was the joke was like, what do you want the data to say? That was kind of our job. We could give any answer we wanted based on our analysis. So take your North Star, take your business goals as a company, and go into the data and figure out, what is success for your user.
Oh, got it. All right, let's go. What's next? Henry, Cyril, you're back. Don't worry. So yeah, Henry.
Yeah, sorry.
What's next?
Where did you lose me?
No, we actually lost you just at the end, so it's perfect. It was a good battle.
Sorry.
I say it's all good. So yeah, Henry, what's next for Apollo?
What's next? I think joining more. There's still some core systems we want to join in. That's more from a kind of like data infrastructure side, and then really iterating and improving upon our PQL model. There's not a one size fits all on that. Like, there's multiple types of PQLs, multiple stages of PQLs. I think it evolves over time. I don't think it's kind of like this is our PQL framework and definition, and like it's going to be the same for 2 years. And depending where they fit on that spectrum, you might have really low friction, low value PQLs, which you would expect to convert, but maybe it doesn't make sense to pass those to sales because the ROI won't be good enough on it. So do you pass them through an automated sequencer and kind of nudge them to that conversion point, and looking down the PQL funnel to find those high friction, high value ones where a sales intervention makes more sense, and like continuing to iterate on that and work out where those bands are on that spectrum, and then just like that kind of more data, more personalization to make our outreach much more personalized and much more helpful and valuable to customers when they receive it.
Can you give us like an example of that? Like at least what the dream end state looks like for like personalized content?
Dream end state. I think it's having plays, like PQL plays built out so simple is rarely simple. Simple is usually very complex with a clever kind of overlay on. And I think getting to that point where all of the complexity happens behind the scenes, and then we're feeding highly actionable, time bound to your point. So like it's got to be actioned on within a certain window, otherwise it's going to start to go stale. Feeding that to the sales team, feeding it to marketing so that they can better segment, better run campaigns, and then lean more into the experimentation versus the building side. Like how can we tweak that? Have a regular process for kind of pulling those experimentation levers, and then optimize that whole funnel.
Good. So what you're saying is like, just trying to summarize it a little bit. It's like, like if I was going back to the PLG, the PQL example you mentioned with like the outbound team at the beginning, right? It's like a good example, like high personalized content would be, hey, this is a lead that you got. You are getting it because they have engaged with those feature gating features, and they they added like free sequences to Apollo, and we know that like 70% of the people who does this, like the last thing they need to do to book a meeting is to invite a friend to the platform. I'm making things up. Like that is like ultra personalized play backed by data, and then then as a BDR I just have to execute those play with with the confidence that is backed by data, right? Like it's kind of like is that kind of like the dream end state that you were discussing?
Yeah, I think that's an element of it. And like I'll give you another example. I was chatting to one of our team earlier, and we were reviewing kind of just the raw data file of companies and like associated teams. So we identified this one team, and it was in the raw data, so you kind of had to pick through it and kind of work out the story. But they had, call it like 10 paid seats, and probably another 15 or so free teams separate from that main paying account. But then if you picked into those free teams, they were single instance users, largely all sales users, and largely hitting their kind of like early aha moment, habit moment, decent activity levels. So really the play there is kind of main team, you have your kind of economic buyer, decision maker, champion, going to them and saying, hey, look, like you've got a good chunk of your team on the pay plan, but you also have a large chunk of your team on the free plan. Moving them in and like quantifying that kind of maybe usage limits would be expanded based on the performance they're getting on the free plan. This is what you could extrapolate out to. And like, it's a very clear path to ROI. Like that's all in the data, but putting that into a simple like call out on that record.
Yeah.
So they're like, okay, yeah, this is really great. And then putting a score on that. So you can stack rank by score and say, right, show me my 10 accounts that this morning I can hit those and have the highest impact overall. Because like, you can't automate everything. It does take time to do a lot of this, even if you surface that data. So you've got to make sure you're investing the time and intervening at the right moment where you're going to get the kind of the maximum return on your effort as well.
Got it. That's good. So we have 40 minutes left here. I want to make sure we go through the question from the audience. So Cyril, there's a bunch of questions for you, so I can give Henry some time to breathe here a little bit. So let me go through the list here on the data team. What was it? So I think Kenny Wong here asked you, Cyril, like, typically, like how big is the data engineering resource like dedicated to the sales team? Like, in general, like how do you make sure like there's enough data bandwidth to support the sales team? Like, how do you approach that kind of like challenge, I guess, is the question.
Well, it's there's definitely not one size fit them all there. So, what we're seeing with our clients is most clients at scale, that have more than 5 to 10 analytics folks. They usually are going with an hub and spoke model, as we call it. It means if you've got a centralized core data team that's going to be doing most of the plumbing and the modeling, and then you're going to have usually BI, focused folks embedded in different teams that are going to be using the data that is modeled by the core data team for their team themselves. So, for sales, you're going to have sales analysts or revenue analysts. You're going to have marketing analysts, things like that. So, we see that more and more for companies that have achieved a certain scale. Now, for I want to say the classic structure is going to be maybe a data engineer, a couple of what we call the analytics engineer now, and maybe 2-3 BI analysts that are going to be able to give the data to the company.
And so what's the scaling factor there? I guess, when you support, working with Henry and Apollo now, is it like, you have, one analyst, 2 engineers, 3 data analytics engineer? Like, how do you make sure that it scales with the size of the org, I guess? Like, is there like a scaling factor there?
I'll start, Henry, you can add your thoughts. I think it's always when there's pain somewhere, and then Spain is growing and you find your data team being the bottleneck of everything that's happening inside of the organization. Data is not refreshed, or there's a backlog that keeps getting bigger, and people get upset. And so this is probably a good moment to think about your sizing your data team. But it's not just about data teams. It's not just about human people. It's also about automation and making sure that if you hire, it's for the right reasons, not because you're going to have another human in the process. Because human are expensive. We're a consulting firm, so I do love humans, but it is growing a team is tricky. It has a ton of headcounts, of course, and sorry, I was looking for the word overhead. And there's the CEO at Clearbit actually has a very interesting take on this. It's like for him, hiring is a failure at automation. And I think there's some truth to it. And so when you find yourself as a data team being overwhelmed with just day-to-day operation, you don't even have time to think about the next phase. This is where you start thinking very much on either hiring or changing your processes.
And Andrew, what's the structure today at at Apollo? I guess just to give Kenny some colors here.
Yeah, it's split kind of 50-50 now. So we still we have the MTLA team supporting us still on a lot of the model work and a lot of the foundations, and then internally we have a kind of head of BI and analytics, and then we have a couple of analysts both on the product and the BI side. I think early hiring for me, I've always indexed on definitely like full stack capability for the individual, so that they can kind of wear many hats. And then I think as you grow, you may want to specialize into like either specific tools or specific kind of functions, either on like the analytics engineer or the like insights and the analysis part. But early on, I've lent more towards full stack and like generalists.
Yeah, you build with the generalists, you grow with the experts, essentially.
Yeah. And I have both questions for both of you, right? Since you've seen like those kind of like growth of teams, scale like in terms of users. Like Taylor asked a question that was like if you're a small company, a younger startup, like you don't have the headcount to hire like a BI team. You might not even have the money, to kind of like use a warehouse as a system of record, like as you were mentioning, Henry. Like what's your recommendation approach there? Like like what's the first step towards building that dream? Of like warehouse as a single source of truth. Like unified data that you have confidence that everybody can use. Like how do you take your first step? I guess.
Yeah. There's definitely a right time. 100%. I think in that early growth phase, just really thinking ahead and like assuming that you're going to get there. How do you want to plan your current data models, stack, like systems, processes? Like 80-20 is really good, and there's a time and place for it. But if you do 80-20 for too long, it will catch up to you. So I think like there's a balance for sure, but I'd say think ahead, and like and speaking from experience, having 1,000 custom fields in your CRM is not the greatest situation to find yourself in. So just like continually like monitor that, like have a lens on kind of what you're deploying and what you're building, and like does it scale? Does it work for us in the future? Is this going to be tech debt that we inherit in the short term?
Yeah.
So what do you think? Like I know you have a ton of really interesting views on this.
Yeah, so we've seen it all from a startup of 2 to public companies, and we've seen also companies that wants to buy the tool. They just I want Snowflake, I want Looker, just give me that. The thing is that the tool is never an answer. The tool is just what you're going to be using to achieve success. So for a company that is a bit small, they don't have that much budget. Don't go into too much infrastructure, because you're going to fail at maintaining the stack, because you're not going to have the headcounts, and in the end you're going to pay for something you're not using. So start small as always. Be agile about it, and maybe what you need to start early on is just Excel, and a bit of automation there, and then you can scale. But also, where is data fitting into your roadmap? What is your data strategy? What I see mostly is that startups won't think about data early on, because they don't produce that much data first, of course, but also very focused on building their products. The thing is that data at scale is so very important because you can monetize data. Nowadays you can really leverage platforms like Snowflake to do that. And I think Henry will never disagree to me that Apollo being very data driven, of course, being a data company, like data was part of your strategy from day one, I assume, Henry.
Yeah, 100%.
So with that in mind, when you think about that, you know that you need to invest. You know that you're going to be spending money, but it's not about spending money for the sake of spending money. It's about spending money because it's going to be, you're going to see return on investments.
I would also add to that, I feel like everybody has a preconception of data is like this very expensive investment in just in money, time, and people. And I think today you can get started on a BigQuery, a Snowflake instance, super cheap. Everybody's give you credit. The technical barrier is actually super low. You don't have to be a data engineer, DBA. We're not talking about deploying Hadoop anymore to get started. So we've seen more, even at Census here, we see a lot of smaller companies actually adopting, the warehouse as a single source of truth, even though they might not have lots of data to Cyril's point, but they want to kind of make sure they're future-proofing themselves of we don't want to do this big migration when it's too late. And Henry's point of now we need to move everything that used to live in Salesforce into a warehouse so we can have confidence in our data. And it's actually pretty affordable and easy to put together, at least in the early beginnings, right? There will always be a point where, to Cyril's point, is you're starting to have too much data, you have noise, and this is where you need to start treating your data as a product and transforming it, making sure you have internal stakeholders that consume your product, right? Whether it's the ops team from Henry or marketing team for ads and things like that. But that comes later. But I think today there's not much stopping anyone to go on Snowflake.com, BigQuery or whatever, and buying a warehouse that costs you $5 a month to run. That's the barrier to entry is very low there, I would say. There is two other interesting questions here that I want to kind of put to both of you, right? It's kind of similar. It's how do you go to analytics team and say, hey, it's time to do something else with your data? So that's Nico's question. It's how do you approach the conversation with your analytics team to value operation analytics, right? And then Kenny has another kind of very similar questions, how does the GTM team kind of discover what data is available? So it's kind of like, hey, cool, I'm in Henry's team, I want to do some crazy automation. How do I know the data exists, and how do I make sure it's available to me? I think the two very similar questions. So, Henry, I don't know if you can tell us how it works.
I guess I can kind of answer the first bit. And I think they're very similar. They're very linked. The way that we have the team structured at Apollo is very much so I have revenue operations, which is a centralized function and contains sales ops, marketing ops, CS ops, partner ops, everything underneath that. Then we have systems. So that's all of our go-to-market systems: Salesforce, Intercom, Zendesk, and then we have BI and analytics. So under that kind of that revenue strategy and analytics function, everyone is really close to the same set of data, the systems, and also the business need and business use case and North Star metrics. So that centralization drives a lot of alignment. And then we have certain, either they're ops people or we have certain analysts embedded full-time into their respective teams. So product analysts will be embedded full-time into product, but working out to that centralized analytics team, which means when the need comes up from the team they're embedded in, they can take that back into their grooming or their sprint planning sessions and work it through in kind of in the sense of the roadmap and just having a prioritization model. So we use the RICE framework, but helping to quantify what's the impact of this. And there's a balance there between output reporting and kind of output actionable insights and actionable intelligence. I think going back to the point of at what stage do you deploy it, affordability, depends on your business, but certainly on more product-led businesses, it can be a huge ROI driver very, very early on. If you can improve your conversion rate by like even half a point, like if you've got the scale of users or even like a good number of users, that probably pays for most of the infrastructure straight off the bat.
Got it. We're just on time, so I just want to kind of like wrap up here a little bit.
Just can I add just one thing, Sil?
Okay,
sorry,
on
that, because I think the question was on spot. So the thing is that how do you decide how do you know what data to bring back through with a tool like Census? If you start asking that question, it means that your team are working in silos and that you're not going in the right path. So one thing that's great with Apollo is that it's Henry that is leading all of the analytics initiative, and so is really driving the company in the right direction here, because there's less silos now. That's the responsibility of all the heads of departments to get together and build that roadmap together on what they will do with the data. And it's not like the data team is working on their own, and then the rest of the organization is begging for some insights or something. Now at scale, you can use some cataloging tools. This is also something that's possible, where someone that has maybe less interaction with data team can go in there and see what's available with context, and be able to use tools like Census to bring the data into their own platforms. Great wrap up. So this couple of questions we haven't answered, so I will make sure to share it with Henry and Cyril, and we can get them answered via email. We have like your details, so we can follow up with you to provide you the answer. But yes, Katie, if you can pop back up and tell people about the remaining of the day.
Yeah, definitely. Feel free to connect with Henry, Cyril, or Sil on LinkedIn. We'll send out these slides. We'll send out the recording. It'll be available on demand at the same registration link. Thank you, everyone, so much for attending. And please do make sure to join our Slack community, the Operational Analytics Club, where we'll be talking about other great data topics. We have OA Coffee, which is every 2 weeks chat where we send you coffee and talk about different kinds of data and RevOps topics. Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.